You are not hidden. There's never been a moment you were forgotten. You are not hopeless. Though you have been broken, your innocence stolen, I hear you whisper underneath your breath. I hear your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. I will never stop marching to reach you in the middle of the hardest fight. It's true, I will rescue you. I hear the whisper underneath your breath. I hear you whisper you have nothing left. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. I will never stop marching to reach you in the middle of the hardest fight. It's true, I will rescue you. Oh, I will rescue you.
Thank you to Emma for that beautiful performance. Good morning to staff, students, and parents. Thank you for joining us on this important day. At the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, a ceasefire was declared, marking the end of the First World War. Although H.G. Wells thought it would be the war to end war, this was sadly not to be. Ongoing military conflict across the globe means that it is still important for us to look back and reflect. We thank you for joining us to mark the 103rd anniversary of this event.
This assembly is our collective act of remembrance, not just for the 20 million people who died during the First World War, but for all subsequent victims of warfare. With the upheaval of the COVID-19 situation over the past 2 years, perhaps we have gained a small insight into how global tragedies can impact our daily lives. We dedicate this time today to the memory of those who suffered and died in conflict, and to acknowledge the enormous debt we owe to previous generations for their sacrifice.
Taking part in an annual public act of remembrance helps us to learn important lessons that were hard-won in times of great danger. It promotes the values we hold most dearly at Dulwich Singapore: respect and empathy for those who have lived through war, integrity, and a responsibility to preserve their memory for future generations. The theme of our Remembrance Assembly today is young people in war, innocent victims caught up in conflicts whose lives were forever changed.
Warfare has caused some of the most profound changes in global history. The First World War marked the end of several global empires, but also the emergence of extremist ideological forces such as communism and fascism. Today, we remember the overwhelmingly terrible changes brought about by war, but we also look to the future to prevent these things from happening again.
Thank you to the Ignite students for that performance of Green Day's Time of Your Life. Year 9 historians recently conducted family research into the role of young people in war. I found out that my grandmother was only 8 years old in 1944 when a doodlebug bomb fell on her village in the south of England. The bomb devastated the center of the village, killing 6 people and injuring many others. The local school was destroyed, and she remembers a big mirror falling on top of her from the power of the blast. After this tragedy, all students had to travel to the next village for school for several years. Interestingly, even now, it is still a mystery why this small village was targeted, reminding us of the often inexplicable nature of warfare.
In my research, I found out that my grandpa was only 3 years old when Hanoian people had to evacuate to the forest due to the French reoccupation of Indochina. His family had to walk around 300 kilometers to a safer province, with the family having to hire people to carry my grandpa in a basket as he was too young. When he was 7 years old, due to the ongoing war, he could only go to school at night and had to walk 8 kilometers each way, the only source of light either being a jar of fireflies or a fire created by petrol and cloth. He eventually graduated from university and became a teacher during the Vietnam War. He had to take students to trenches during bombing raids and multiple times only just managed to survive bomb attacks. Despite the challenges he faced through his life due to armed conflict, my Ong is today one of my closest family members and someone I enjoy sharing music with. This project demonstrated to me the resilience shown by young people in war and the importance of remembering their experiences.
I found out that 2 members of my family were children during war. My grandfather was 4 years old in 1942, living in India. He remembered the shortages of food and clothing, as well as hearing cries of grief echo from neighboring houses when news of war fatalities came through. My aunt was 7 years old during the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971. The blackouts during the war meant activities such as homework, cooking, and reading became impossible during the evenings. She remembers hearing the fighter jets flying low over Ajmer and seeing trains that were sending rations and supplies to the soldiers at the borders. My research showed me the commonality of experiences of children in war despite the differing political reasons for the conflicts. The long-term impact of war on young people must not be forgotten.
My uncle is an ex-Marine and was deployed in driving the Taliban out of Afghanistan 11 years ago. Whilst recalling his experience, he stated that him and his friends would go out on patrol with sweets, candy, crayons, pens, and coloring pencils in order to attempt to gain the trust of the children. But he said that they saw him and his friends as aliens. He said that the children aged from 4 to 12 were skeptical about talking to him, in fear that the Taliban was watching. He described those same children as naive to the extreme political situation around them, but also how some teenagers were bribed by the Taliban to set off devices in order to attempt to kill him and his friends. His story shows us how relevant remembrance is to the current day and describes the ongoing impacts that war still has on the world.
I found out that my great-grandfather Shirak-son was living in Pyongyang in North Korea in the 1940s, when Korea was divided into 2 at the 38th parallel in 1945. He had to buy a boat in 1949 to transport his wife and 6 children to South Korea just before the Korean War began, settling in Taean. When my great-grandfather sadly passed away in 1951, my grandfather was just 8 years old. Learning about this experience showed me the sacrifices so often made by families during conflict and reminded me of the value of loved ones in challenging situations. These stories remind us that we are members of a global community and we must learn to live worldwide to create a peaceful future for all. The role of international diplomacy and communication is vital in laying the foundations of a cooperative world. On a smaller scale, these stories remind us of the role of individuals in shaping lives. The next piece will be A Mother's Promise, performed by Mana Yamazaki.
Here I am, floating in emerald sea. Keep me dancing, keep me as still as can be. And I try to keep the balance right. And I try, but it feels like wasted time. But these heavy hands, they're pulling me down on my chest, latching on, coloring all of my flesh. Quietly, you hover over me, and I fight, but it feels like wasted time. Feels like wasted time. Say goodnight. I know that I'm swallowed in sea. We collide, colors that devour me. Just say goodnight, I'm already down. And I cry, already down. Already down. And I cry, already down. And I try, and I try, but it feels like wasted.
Thank you to Mana for that wonderful performance. We will now hear about what the lower senior school English students have been doing for Remembrance Day, read by Year 10 students, followed by a performance of Concerto in B Minor by the Dulwich Philharmonic Orchestra.
Some classes in lower school English spent a lesson reading extracts from the Save for Children's 2018 War on Children report. Students read several first-person accounts from children who have been caught up in conflict, losing their education, their homes, their family, their country, losing their childhood. These students used these non-fiction stories to create a blackout poem, a poetic distillation of these accounts. These lower school poems will be read by a group of last year's Year 9 English Poetry Slam winners, who are now in Year 10.
Halima's Story, a blackout poem by Isabel Siu. I was captured. I was 13. They shot her. They threatened me. I had no choice. Married. I didn't even know who. I will escape. Completely isolated. News come, my husband had been killed. I was rescued. They took me away. I hear, I'm afraid. I hope my children are protected.
Halima's Story, a blackout poem by Phoebe Edwards. I was captured. I resisted. They tied my mother to a tree, killed my family, took me away, coming for me again.
Kabbalah's Story, a blackout poem by Enrique van der Pump. Recruited, younger children had less guilt. Sent to the front lines with only sticks. Told he was invincible. Seeing his friends die, escape from his memories. I've lost my childhood.
Reem's Story, a blackout poem by Emma Chung. My home suddenly fell. Could not breathe, gas and smoke. Walked whilst bleeding. Asked to go home, which we didn't have, so I left. I could not see because of the darkness, could not sleep because of the pain. I feel worried, sad, scared, pain. I wish the war would stop.
Thank you to the Dulwich Philharmonic Orchestra, reminding us of the power of music as a part of the act of remembering. In September, the English department invited students in the senior school to write a poem for Remembrance Day. There were many moving and poignant submissions. The winning poem was Song by Alex Lynn, an extraordinary talent in Year 7. Part 1, Song, will be read by Kira Tigert, and Part 2, Flowers by Harry Magnus.
Song. A song echoes across a barren land like a foreigner or a passing crow, sweet life in dead earth. A song that sings about everything and nothing and the things in between. It sings about the past, golden sun, sapphire sky, laughter, a noise that no longer belongs in this land. It sings of a boy who used to run across fields of endless green, an emerald ocean of grass. It sings of the tales told at dusk, the smell of shepherd's pie in the ovens, and when the sky was filled with 1,000 stars. A minor chord struck, bringing a dissonant shiver in the peaceful lullaby. It sings about the conscription papers fluttering around, nailed on walls, trees, anything, really. A long stream of people, adults, elderly, and even children, excited, chattering, waiting as they lined up for war. It sings about the present without stopping for a breath, a smooth transition from peace to bloodshed. It sings about people holding guns, storming in houses, and shooting. It sings about soft, eerie whistling, exploding into flames and killing. It sings about red, crimson rivers flowing down streets and the stink of death. It sings about loss, sacrifice, pain, pain, pain like a blade to the heart. It sings about the fire, dancing in the chaos. It sings of a time when the rat-tat-tat of the machine guns was as common as the chirp-chirp of crickets on a black summer's day. It sings of a time when the children at the roadsides with hollow eyes become part of scenery. Broken walls, broken glass, broken spirit, broken people. Where people bear so much pain, their souls about to tear, and you'd rather die than live with the burden of seeing too much. Too much like flowing scarlet and the remains of the dead. The song sings of war, of a time never to be repeated again. A Solomon promise that's broken, 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 again, again, again.
A meadow grew near the graves of the dead, lost in war, dotting the sullen land with multicolored specks, almost like a rainbow stretched after a storm. Yellow roses represent friendship. Blooming like the stars themselves had descended to earth, bundled together, forming constellations in a lush green sky. Red carnations represent heartache, delicate like folds of thin fabric layered on top of each other, or like a heart, so beautiful, yet so fragile. Purple hyacinths represent sorrow, like long lilac streaks across the field, like tears, mourning, crying for those who won't wake up again. And poppies? They symbolize consolation and a peaceful future, like the comfort received by a person after a loss, always bright red, smiling at you, and wishing for a peaceful future.
Thank you to all of the English students for their poetry and performances today. The DCSG community will now perform the hymn, Amazing Grace.
Amazing
final two performances will be from the Year 12 IB dance students, followed by a reading of the poem In Flanders Fields by Year 13 English Ambassador Cara McCormick.
In Flanders fields, the poppies blow. Between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
Thank you to the dance students and Sakara for their powerful performances today. We will now have a minute of silence. This minute of silence gives us time to reflect on what has been shown here today. This is an opportunity to remember not only those who died in wartime before us, but those suffering in war zones today. Please also use this time to think about what we as individuals can do to promote a peaceful world for the future. How can you make service a daily habit in your life?
During the silence, we remember in particular 2 of the 850 old Elenians whose names are engraved on the Memorial Cross in London. Anthony Barber and Robert Matthews, killed in the defense of Singapore in February 1942, and now buried at Kranji War Cemetery. We also remember old Elenian Garth Carpenter, who lost his life during the Malay emergency in June 1951.
Please stand. Kira will read the Ode of Remembrance by Lawrence Binion. We will then hear the hymn, I Vow to Thee, My Country. After the last post, we will observe the minute of silence in memory of all those who have suffered and died in wartime.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
I
Thank you for your time, observation, and participation.